From studio dreams to squeegee success, unexpected paths lead to thriving opportunities.
Love with to be my life's work, to be my passion. In no way. It was a job that looked like a juxtaposition of the dark recording studio. I could be outside, there's an element of freedom to it. And I got into it to pay the rent. That was it. I wanted to make sure that I could afford to eat and live. I was living in Vancouver, British Columbia at the time. And so that's where it's these inflection points that open your eyes to opportunity. And that's kind of where I landed was, geez, I really love this industry. And if I love this industry, it means other people will. And if other people will, I can probably build a workforce. And if I can build a workforce, I can probably start a business.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Conquer the Mind podcast. We're on episode 40-something. So thank you, everyone that's been tuning in and making this podcast a massive success. So I'm very excited for today's podcast. Long awaited. Chris Stonis, the CEO and founder of Elite Window Cleaning out of Canada, and then Sparkle Squad in the United States. So Chris has built a career in Canada, building a career in America now, and he's kind of your all things window guru, Chris, huh?
Well, thank you. I'll try to live up to that. All things window guru. Most things, many things. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So I know kind of for the podcast and the listeners, I always kind of say there's two like really big audience that I think kind of my biggest goal is to try to help them kind of better understand the realities of conquering their mindset, their future, their career, really kind of people high school, college, 20s, just no idea what they want to do. And I've been there before. It's very confusing. Like you graduate college, you feel like you should have everything figured out. And then people 40s, 50s, 60s, already through their career and feel like it might be like too late to kind of change things around. But, it's really never too late if you kind of have that mindset. Like life, we only have one opportunity at this life. So trying to make the most of it. So Chris, can we start just you're in college, you're graduating from college. Was it, you're the founder of a massive business now. Was it always the entrepreneurship route for you, or where were you when you were graduating college? Did you have it all figured out that you were going to be a CEO?
I had none of it figured out. I actually was like anti-figured out. I was trying to figure it out, which was creating more roadblocks than it did clear pathways. So for myself, I was raised in an entrepreneurial home. So when people are brought up in entrepreneurial homes, albeit successful or not overly successful, which actually happened to be my case, it was you got to understand how you kind of sing for your supper in the world. And when you're a child and that's the only environment you understand, there's no steady paycheck. Your parents are, working days and nights to make this thing happen. Becomes your frame of reference. So for me, entrepreneurship was in my DNA, but not necessarily on my roadmap when I was going through school. So I actually went through school to be a sound engineer. So private post-secondary school, and thought, I'd been a musician for most of my life, and thought that, I wanted to be in the studio capturing performances, like kind of like a photographer in a way, capturing these moments. And I loved it. I excelled at it, and pretty quickly found myself on the path to that career. I actually ended up working in one of the top studios in the world, working on Grammy-winning records with, celebrity artists. And it was at that moment where I was probably most confused on my path, which I think, when you speak about, going through school and graduating with this knowledge, what am I going to do with it? How does it apply to my life? For me, I had the application, but I didn't love the experience. I was more invigorated by the learning aspect and going through the program and becoming that than I really was. And there was no real success path. So, you talk about too late. It feels too late when you're 21 to change gears. And it's not like I work with people day in, day out who are changing gears in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. But when you're in that seat, it feels very real. It feels very impossible, almost. And I had to make the jump. So I left the studio and you know, said my goodbyes to something I had worked at for really my entire life. And that opened up a tremendous amount of possibility for me.
Mhm.
Window cleaning was something that I did not plan in any way to fall in love with, to be my life's work, to be my passion. In no way. It was a job that looked like a juxtaposition of the dark recording studio. I could be
Mhm.
outside, I could be, there's an element of freedom to it. And
Mhm.
I got into it to pay the rent. That was it. I wanted to make sure that I could afford to eat and live. I was living in Vancouver, British Columbia at the time. And
Mhm.
so that's where the, you know, it's these inflection points that open your eyes to opportunity. And that's kind of where I landed was, geez, I really love this industry. And if I love this industry, it means other people will. And if other people will, I can probably build a workforce. And if I can build a workforce, I can probably start a business. So that was kind of like the non-linear path to where this all began. And then I think curiosity just took over. And for
Mhm.
me, it was, how hard can I push the limits of what's possible in this industry? Like if I can get from a million people that, you know, millions of people that want to be in the music industry to the top of that silo I was in,
Mhm.
certainly I can push the limits in the window cleaning industry. And that's kind of been my ethos from day one, was, you know, trying harder for a
Mhm.
longer duration. And when we get into, you know, mindset, um, I think it's that the recipe's actually been pretty simple.
Mhm.
So that's the long way of saying I didn't know what I was doing when I graduated. I thought I
Yeah.
did, but I was wrong.
Huh. And how long after you kind of graduated were you working yourself up in the entertainment industry? And then what was kind of like the high rise moment of the entertainment industry? And then was it like a kind of like weeks, months where you're like, you know, this is not necessarily my thing, or was it like a light bulb moment, like all of a sudden where you're like, no, this is just not for me? Was it like a build up or like pretty
Yeah.
sporadic?
It was a build up. So my ascension from graduating school to working in the warehouse studio for Bryan Adams was pretty quick.
Mhm.
I'd been identified as top of my class, and they right out of school kind of jumped into that role. And then within the studio, over the course of about a year and a half, worked myself from guy who fills coffee cups to, you know, guy who's running the controls on records, because that's what I was trained to do, or at least assisting on the engineering.
Mhm.
I would say like the highlight moment was recording the Christmas album for Michael Bublé. That guy just was incredible, and he was a kind person, and I loved it.
Yeah.
Um, but the slow build of not seeing, like, this, our ceilings in our careers, in our youth, or where we want to go in life, seems so far and ethereal that
Mhm.
mine became really clear really quick. And that was, I think, the discomfort was, it was a great job where people make like it's a lifelong career. People will work in that position that I was happily for their whole career. For
Mhm.
me, it was the lack of upward. If I was already in, you know, one of the best studios, and I was already working with some of these artists that I had never dreamed I would be in the room with, where was there to go? And I think that that's what started to wear on me, was the lack of progression and lack of evolving. And, you know,
Mhm.
that ties into that entrepreneurial upbringing, that in my DNA, I need to be moving forward, or I can't, you know, I'm stalled out. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think that's it. No one's really asked me that, whether it was a light bulb moment or a slow build. So that's why I'm kind of taking pause, but it was maybe a slow realization
Mhm.
that I just wasn't cut out for that role. I needed to not be in an employment situation where I had no vertical to climb.
Mhm. Hmm. I like that, Chris. That's really interesting. And personally, one of my goals for all the guests is to at least have one question that you haven't heard before and kind of makes you think about your own life and reflect a little bit. I always find that
Mhm.
very helpful for the viewers to hear someone that has accomplished massive success and like just hearing the different paths and mindset along the way. And one of the big
Mhm.
things is being consistent along your career. But I'm really curious, especially nowadays. And I suffered from this as well, where, I started a career as well, like in social media marketing. People do all these different skills. Maybe you're an athlete, maybe you're in corporate America, you're kind of working your way up this path. But I feel like a lot of times you're kind of just so stuck in the motions, you kind of forget about that big picture.
Mhm.
I guess my question is, how do you make sure that the stuff that you're doing is actually in line with kind of like that big picture of like your wants, your desires? Like, when you made that transition to the window industry, did you know, like, were you thinking like, how do I avoid what just previously happened, where I don't want to work another like 5-10 years and then miss out on that? How were you when you were in that transition? Were you like, all right, how am I gonna avoid, figuring out in 5 years that maybe I don't like this industry? Like, how
Mhm.
did you figure out that's what you want and you're gonna go all in with it, if that makes sense, Chris?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So there's a few things. And like all of this is with the clarity of hindsight. So I am no savant. I am no like I honestly the simple version of it is I followed the path of joy and what I wanted to do and what I like to do. And
Hmm.
as I continued to follow that path, it just kept appearing in front of me. But truly was I wanted to understand this industry more deeply than anyone had. So I spent 6 years working for companies around the globe and trying to get the education, because there's no school of window cleaning. There's no formal education. I could go to business school, but then I'd lack the practical application.
Hmm.
So rather than do that, my thought was, I'm going to learn from as many people who have been successful in this industry as I can. So I worked for about a half a dozen companies across Canada and as far away as Australia, and
Hmm.
just really tried to look at from each of those experiences, what worked, what didn't, what was the culture like? Did the people respect the owner? Did they, was it the hierarchical structure of the business like enjoyable to be a part of? And I was just kind of taking notes along the way. And it was when I was in Australia and I worked for a really bad company that I realized I had enough information to create a good one. I'd seen
Hmm.
enough good and I had seen enough bad that it was time. So in 2012, um, I literally filed for the business license from a hotel room in Australia because I knew like I'm booking this flight back the day my feet touch the soil. I'm starting this and I'm putting myself into it. And
Yeah.
when it comes to like knowing where you want to go, I've learned over the years that you need as an entrepreneur to see beyond the horizon. So we do an exercise annually with all of our owners in Sparkle Squad, all our franchisees in Sparkle Squad and Elite, which is, understanding and retooling your why. Like when you get into business, we get really clear on why you're doing it. And then we break that down into 10 years and 3 years and 1 year and then 90 days. And you can actually start to build yourself a path to that why and in that end goal. But
Hmm.
what people often forget is we grow and we evolve. And my why of 5 years ago and my why of today are very different. Certainly, my why of 11 years ago when I had no children and my why today are very different. And
Yeah.
what I think people assume when I start a business, I need a steady state of a goal. That is not in my experience. The path will present itself and you retool as you move through life and business and all these things. So uh,
Hmm.
annually, another long answer to a simple question, but annually, I think I reassess that. I've been doing that for the better part of a decade now, and
Hmm.
kind of spend a day getting clear on who I am and who I am as a leader and where I want to do. Because my job now is to support new entrepreneurs, right, and to allow them to have the success that I have had in this industry. So it's really important for my evolution to be in sync with theirs, or at least in the same cadence. So yeah, we really work on um, vision planning and then breaking it down into actionable steps. You can take the most audacious goal and say, I want to be an astronaut. You can actually break that down into actionable steps that you'll take today and tomorrow, and then it'll be a huge complex plan that'll take 20 years to complete, but you can do it. And that's what we try to do with entrepreneurship, is break things down into chunks that are like totally understandable and totally actionable, that lead to the next step, and eventually, after a long enough duration, lead to where you want to go and what you want to do.
I think that's a really powerful point, Chris, especially for a lot of like business owners listening to the podcast. Business ownership is like so far from instant gratification. It's like everything you're doing today, you won't weave the benefits till, maybe 6 months later if you're lucky. So I really like the idea of setting goals on those timelines. And I really want to stick on this point. I didn't think we'd kind of dive into this, but I really think this will be helpful for the viewers in terms of setting goals. Do you have any like best practices on when you're setting goals? Is it like, I've heard like, do the SMART goals, like specific, measurable, achievable, results oriented. But how like specific are you getting with the goals when you're actually writing? Are you writing those down?
Well, it depends how in the near term or far term they are, like longer term they are. So what I do is I take, and this is going to sound a little out there, but it's worked for me. Is I spend the time to mentally go to that place, and what does it look like? What does it feel like? What is the structure around me? If I'm projecting in my mind to 10 years in the future, I'm looking around, I'm like smelling the air. I'm trying my best to understand what that would need to look like for it to be achievable. And then I just start protracting backwards, and I start to go, okay, what's that next level? What's that next level? And so for me, it's more of like, again, like this path that I try to unfold in front of me. Then of course you're going to use, when you get things clear, you're going to use SMART goals or some other form factor to make them achievable and time bound and all these things. But to understand what they are, that's the entrepreneurial essence that lives in here. There's nowhere else. Like there's no playbook that you can download that's going to say, this is how it's going to look. That's up to you. That's up to us. We mold the clay as entrepreneurs. So I really try to quiet myself, think about it deeply. And if I don't get there, or I don't get the clarity I want, I come back to it. And I keep them too. That's the other part. Because at some point when you keep them, you're going to catch up to your first, and you can go, I thought it would look like this, and it actually looks like this. Like, where was I off? Where was I on? And it gets really fun. So, that's kind of the how, I guess.
No, I really like it. It's just this idea that no one really has like their path figured out from the start. They just keep learning all these new skills and just keeps going with the mindset and consistency along the way. And then you find how to apply your previous skill set to the next adventure, which I think is really interesting. And as you
said something a second ago, if I could I just want to rewind the tape just a sec. You said like that instant gratification and like you can't go in with that mindset. This allows you to break that pattern. And, one of the things that stands out to me statistically is less than 1% of Americans ever run a marathon. It's like 0.8% of Americans run a marathon. It's almost numerically matched with the percentage of Americans who grow a successful entrepreneurial endeavor. And so when you look at those two things and you go, well, is this just like cherry picking stats, or is there a correlation here? The correlation is stamina. Like entrepreneurs, they need all the grit markers, they need the vision, they need all these things. But more importantly than anything, they need the stamina to go to the distance, because it doesn't get easier. Being an entrepreneur does not get easier over time. You become better conditioned. Marathons don't get easier. You just become better conditioned to the duration. And so like when we're talking about vision and we're talking about all these things, a big part of it is, what do I need to condition myself for to achieve that vision? What plan do, there's a quote, and I'm lost on who said it, but it was, You only need to be a little bit better for a longer period of time. And that's the kind of trick that we really work on our owners with is if you think you're going to jump into a business and have immediate success and cash your chips out, just statistically, it's not going to happen. It does from time to time, but it is so, so rare. But the statistically obvious one is you're going to try harder than you ever dreamed you would for a longer period of time. And there's so much joy in that effort. If you find joy in effort, you're an entrepreneur and you can go the distance. So that was it. Just wanted to circle back to that point.
No, I think that's really powerful. And I know one of like my social media mentors, if you will, that I listen to, Alex Hermosi, that's crafted this incredible, like probably $1 billion empire at this point. And he says, like, if you can get used to doing things with no expectation of getting anything in return for like years later, like you're unstoppable. Like nothing can stop you because you just have the mindset that you'll get those results later on. And I think it really just starts with your consistency and having that why statement, which I think is really powerful. But Chris, you made the transition from the entertainment industry, like really cool industry. Like I bet a lot of like fun things are happening. Then you make the transition to business ownership. You know, there's a lot of people watching. They're in a comfortable position, maybe in corporate America, and, you know, they're thinking about business ownership. They're getting all this information, but, you know, analysis paralysis definitely plays like a strong role where you get so much information, like a short period of time. And, you know, you're already in a 9-to-5 position with a corporate salary. Like you don't necessarily need to make this adjustment. How does someone necessarily know that like business ownership could be something that would be like something that they should be considering, even though they may have that corporate kind of salary, but they've always kind of thought, you know, maybe business ownership, as you said kind of earlier, it was kind of in your DNA, but like it took a little bit to figure out where it was.
Yeah, I think it comes from like you said right out of the gates, we got one crack at this thing. You got to follow the joy. And like, yeah, comfort is nice, but if comfort isn't joyful or isn't filling your bucket in that 9-to-5, you look elsewhere. And if you do that, if you're self-reflective and self-aware, I don't think people are self-aware enough by nature, everyone, myself included. If we could have a little bit more of that in our lives, I think we'd live in a better world. But it's being self-aware enough to go, I'm willing, I am unhappy in this situation. Holistically, I am willing to bet on what I believe will make me happier and really understand the risks associated, like the effort that you're going to have to put in. You know, it's like when you grow tomatoes in your garden and you eat them and you're like, oh, that is the best tomato I've ever had. Is it? Or is it the effort of like spending 6 months to get one tomato? Like, is that why it tastes so good? And for me, I think that with entrepreneurship, a lot of it is like the joy of achievement, the fulfillment of forward progression, all these things are really tough to get in a corporate setting. And for me, that was it, was like, there was no grand plan. I just was self-aware enough to realize that something was missing. And if I didn't plug that hole, I was never going to become more happy in that environment. I would just become more comfortable.
No, that's really interesting. Just kind of hearing the journey along the steps and making that transition. Because I think a lot of people are in that similar boat where they may have like that first inquiry, but then, you know, they wait till like a year later where things may get a little bit worse in corporate America. And then they're kind of seeking business ownership, but kind of having that why in mind, I think is really important. So I want to dive into Sparkle Squad and Elite Window Cleaning. I know you mentioned you spent like 6 years traveling internationally, trying to figure out the different systems, studying the industry. And then how ultimately, I know the first days you were kind of bootstrapping the business to get started with a borrowed car and a bucket, from what I'm pretty sure. How did what were those initial days like of getting Elite Window Cleaning out of the school, off the ground, if you will? And that was in Canada?
Yeah, that was in Canada. So that was actually, it started in Kingston, Ontario, where I'm speaking from today. So the initial days were just filled with like focusing on what can I do to get where I want to go. It was as bootstrapped as it gets. You know, I landed here, I borrowed a 1997 Pontiac Sunfire. I ratchet strapped some ladders to the roof. I got a Home Depot bucket and I just went after it and managed to sell, my first sale was a $10,000 contract. Big, because of my education. It wasn't because of anything other than I understood the industry on a deep, deep level. So I continued just to push into my knowledge and expand my knowledge on leadership and entrepreneurship. And, I had a whole new classroom that I needed to be in at that point. And my big ethos from day one was, I love this industry. It is so behind the times. I mean, the squeegee was patented in 1936 and is still today the main tool across the industry. So I wanted to apply technology to the tools. I wanted to apply customer service aptitude at a level that had never been done before. And so we focused on that and we built technology through that constant effort. It wasn't easy, but through that stamina, we built technology that allows window cleaners to clean up to 6 stories from the ground without lifts, without ladders. And then we looked at gutter cleaning and we're like, if we're going to add this, how do we become the best in the world at it? How do we make this industry better? And it's, gas powered gutter vacs. So we can use cameras and vacuum out the gutters on a house in minutes, where the industry and our competitors are climbing up and down ladders. Like, we just kept applying this. If we did it differently, start with utopia. What could it look like? And then work back into possibility. Because if you work forward into possibility, you end up where things are today. So over the course of the last 12 years, we built custom technology for every service line that we offer, positioning us as, incredible efficiencies, to clean windows without climbing up and down a ladder in a labor-based business. You end up with incredible marginal efficiencies inside the business, but also it was safety and it was attracting a different type of employee. The technicians in home services, anyone listening or watching this who's thinking about home services, you better be thinking that the technicians you place in your business are the most important thing in your business, because they become the face of your business. And when we removed the broad shoulders, brute strength, kind of rugged side of the business through technology, we were able to open up to a new breed of technician focusing on Gen Z and millennials, and completely change the customer service experience. And once that kind of clicked with the technology, with these years of effort and learning, we ended up with a really, really strong system that was holistic and not rushed into. So I'm really proud of kind of where we started and where we are today, because I've seen every dollar from $1 till multi 7 figures flow through this. And I have the trophies and scars from every dollar, and I can listen to the scars, and I can learn from the trophies, and I can really start to streamline things. So when we launched Sparkle Squad, I'm sorry if I'm being tangential here, but I promise I'll tie it back. We had grown elite coast to coast here in Canada, much smaller market, much smaller demographic, much less franchise friendly, to be honest. There's less franchise business in Canada. And what we realized was we had built something that the industry just deserved. And so we partnered with Happiness Brands to bring Sparkle Squad to the US. And I mean, Happiness shared all those same core values. They have Lawn Doctor, Mosquito Hunters, Eco Maids, these huge systems. And when we came into the US to launch Sparkle Squad, what happened was our 12 years of experience and hard work layered on top of 55 years of Lawn Doctor's experience, layered on top of like a deep understanding of franchising in the US, and the ability to really take the raw materials of elite and put them in a package that was better than we ever dreamed. And that's what we kind of ended up coming to market with, was way back with that borrowed car and bucket. When it started, I wanted to be the best. This is how I'm tying it back here. I wanted to be the best in the industry. That was all I cared about. And I took a long time and a lot of effort. But in Sparkle Squad, when you look at the actual way that brand functions, we achieved that initial goal we did with the launch of Sparkle. And now it's propagating that and being the best in the industry across the entire country. So yeah.
I
Talk
think
about
that's
your vision of
really,
all.
no, I really like it. And really liked your point on figuring out what your utopia looks like and then like really working backwards. Like really, I know the Sandler people I've had on, they're really big on reverse engineering, like your sales process, figure out the numbers you want and then what you need to do on a daily basis, a weekly basis to hit those numbers. And same thing with your life. What does a perfect life for you look like? And then how exactly can you reverse engineer your life to get to all those different points? So I think it's just really interesting. And I think one of the major points, because I talk to a lot of candidates, they're always like, why don't I just do it myself rather than invest into a franchise? And, you know, when I talk to founders like yourself, founders typically spend like a decade plus just to learn a business. And it could be something that seems simple, like painting, flooring, windows, where it's like, yeah, I'll just get my sponge. I'll start, you know, cleaning some of my neighbors' houses. But like the sustainability of all that, like you traveled the world in all these different countries. You spent time learning from people doing the service to figure out not how can you just replicate it, but how can you do things differently and improve upon that service. I think a lot of people considering, should I do it myself rather than invest, you know, 50, 100,000 into a franchise model is, well, I already have a few neighbors that will start paying me. Why do I need to make this big investment? But really the sustainability and like, I would be curious, Chris, what your perspective was when you first started the business, trying to market the business and get those customers. Was it more kind of like a guessing game, or how were you like starting to ramp up the business in those early days?
Yeah, it was a total guessing game. To go just, I want to circle on the entrepreneurship point is there are people that are just through and through entrepreneurs, and I encourage those people to start from scratch. And then there are people who want to be an entrepreneur but want a framework. Those are the people that are, you know, franchising really fits because we give the system, we provide the system. This is the how, this is the why. These are all the moving parts that, like you said, took, you know, decades plus of evolution to create. But you don't just live in our system. I think that's like kind of the fallacy of franchising is people think I'm going to get in and just use their system. What people do as humans is they build systems inside the systems. When you look across the spectrum, the way that they coach is going to be slightly different, or the way they onboard their technicians or incentivize their technicians. There's all these things that become systems within the franchise system. And so people worry that if I buy a franchise, I'm not as entrepreneurial. And it's just not the case, because I watch across Elite and Sparkle Squad, all these amazing entrepreneurs build business systems inside our framework. And I just wanted to like delineate that, because a lot of people get hung up on that. Should I or shouldn't I? And it's like, there's no answer that isn't totally personalized. It's like, is franchising right for you? Is entrepreneurship right for you? That depends. You know, if I were to do this again today, if I were to start from scratch, I actually think I'd be better fit for a franchise model, because I could spend my time building systems inside a franchise system that would fast track my ability to be, you know, disproportionately successful rather than learn every step of the way. Yeah. So I just wanted to like circle back on that. And I've now totally forgot the second question you asked.
No. Now I want to build upon that, because I think this is actually even more interesting, Chris. So on top of like the marketing, so like you're a new business owner trying to market, you don't necessarily know who you're marketing to. And then the other element that I think a lot of candidates, when they're thinking, should I do it myself or franchise, is, you know, they see the 50, 100,000 liquid investment into a franchise and they say, well, why don't I just start that myself? Can you talk about the difference between someone maybe wants to invest into a franchise model versus all the money you probably invested trying to create all these systems, the marketing, the technology? Like, did you end up spending more than someone would if they were to franchise, or
absolutely? Yeah. You know, a cold start entrepreneurial endeavor has so much spillage that you don't factor in. And that's like, you know, it is the fact that I can take those trophies and scars and put them in a system that allows you to, the scars cost money and the trophies generate money, and you want more trophies than scars over the extended game. And so, yeah, I think like from just purely cash flow, profitability standpoint, I would personally do the franchising route because it's a proven system. Again, it's not for everybody. You asked, I remember the question was about marketing. I started in 2012, which was an interesting time in this industry. Marketing was far more simplistic. Most people in our industry didn't even have websites. So it was like you put a website up, maybe you do some early Facebook ads. I remember the week Facebook ads went live. We launched one the first week, and it was like, oh my God, we're paying pennies and getting all these jobs. Like it was, much less complex. Today, marketing is complex. Our marketing team is the biggest single team in the organization. And it's probably one of the hardest jobs in the organization, because ever evolving, the competitive landscape has just changed. And one of the things that you don't get as an independent is big data. So you don't get system averages. You don't get, if we post, for instance, a Facebook ad and it's running across 25 locations from Florida to Denver to, wherever, pick 25 locations across the US. And now we get millions and millions and millions of impressions on that ad. We can actually start to A/B test ad sets in giant data environments. Whereas an entrepreneur starting locally, it's like, okay, I got to pick a picture, put it on, Facebook and see how it performs, and then make a decision after that. So from a marketing standpoint, it's not even comparable. What franchise systems are able to do compared to independents, because the Facebook and Google and these ad platforms, they made these ad platforms in recent years very user friendly and very easy for people to use. They didn't do that because they wanted your business to grow. They did that because they want ad dollars from everybody, and they needed to make it, in order to do that, accessible for everybody. So, the marketing piece is, it's probably the biggest evolution I've seen in my career, is where it was when I started and where it is today.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. And for people debating business ownership, entrepreneurship independently, if you are going to go the independent route, definitely measure, track everything you're doing, all those KPIs, like every ad you run, just track that as much as you can so that you can adjust and kind of pivot. I think that's really helpful, Chris. And for those people that decide, I think I want to be a franchise owner, they're listening, they like everything that they've heard. I know one of the things you talked about when you're looking for kind of an ideal franchise candidate is you talk about it's not where they're coming from, but where they're going. Yeah. I think that's a powerful statement. Can you explain kind of what you mean by that and how people can have the most success in franchising with that mindset?
Yeah, it is. Again, it comes back to that, grit marker, stamina. We spent a year, Sharon Kupak and myself, Sharon's our VP of development. We spent a year getting clear on who is right for this brand before we even launched Sparkle Squad. We want people to win. We don't want, it would be a disservice to the person if we brought somebody in who wasn't going to be successful in the model. And so we really got clear on who that person is. And there's no gender, there's no age, there's no commonality outside of, they need to be action oriented. So our number one marker is action orientation. Will they get up and do things when they need to, as a person? Does their life path show that forward progression? Because the people who are action oriented, you can look at their history and see these stair steps that they've taken, and it's constant. It doesn't go in fits and spurts. So that action orientation is really important. Being able to see that big picture and know where you are in relation to your goals. You don't need to even necessarily know where you want to go. You just need to know you need to move forward and kind of have that built into you. And then the other big part is stamina. You know, I talked about it, the marathon example, but like I'll use another metaphor is we are a Sherpa. We can assist you in climbing Mount Everest by, you know, guiding you to bring the right amount of food and not take the turn that makes you fall off a cliff or all these things. But I can't take a single step for you. I can't lift your foot. I can't use your muscles and move you forward. So you still have to climb Mount Everest, which is a near impossible task. And that's kind of how we look at, is this person who's interested in entrepreneurship aware that they will still have to climb Mount Everest? And, you know, you layer that onto, so that's your grit marker, you lay it onto that action orientation. And then the only watch out that I would have, and it's maybe an introspective thing for your listeners, is if you're considering entrepreneurship, are you a person that believes the world happens to you, or do you happen to the world? Because entrepreneurs happen to the world. You know, there's no victim mentality in true entrepreneurship. It's just not, you know, it's antithetical to the whole experience. So really thinking about, am I somebody who happens to the world? Do I have the stamina for this? And if you start getting the answer yes, you're probably thinking the right path.
Yeah, no, I think that's very powerful. You know, if I feel like every day as an entrepreneur, you know, you wake up, you have kind of like your checklist, you know, things that are high priority, medium priority, lower priority. And, you know, once 9 o'clock hits, the day is like totally different. Like you just like, you don't get to like the things that are high priority till like the next day because too many other high priorities balance in front of that. So yeah, entrepreneurship, if it were easy, I would say like everyone would be doing it and reaping the benefits of the, you know, the benefits of owning an asset, having that flexibility of your lifestyle, you know, being able to go on vacation when you want to go on vacation. So
making crazy money, you know, people look at entrepreneurs and are like, wow, like you're an entrepreneur, you make really good money. It's like, yeah, but I also put in crazy effort and I have to like, you know, build this, like you said, asset over time. So yeah, it's, I love it. My favorite part of my job is working with entrepreneurs, working with new owners, coaching them, like seeing somebody go from new franchise training class where they're learning the ins and outs of this to scaling to, you know, 5 vehicles on the road and things starting to really take shape as a scaled organization. Which was one of the other really cool things about the window cleaning industry is there's simply glass everywhere. Like if you actually walk outside and look around, you'll realize that there, you know, the world is kind of made of glass and the industry of maintaining it is so far behind the curve that for owners who have these great systems and have these great aspirations, you can grow tremendously large businesses in this industry. And so finding those motivated people, giving them the tools to execute on their motivation, and then watching that kind of come to fruition. It's literally, I think I have the best job in the world because it's constant. Like I'm either assisting somebody to overcome an obstacle or I am sharing in celebration of something great that happened. Like those are the only two franchisor kind of hats that I wear. It's like, how can I help you, or how can I celebrate with you and allow you to capitalize on those wins?
Yeah. And it's really powerful for someone like yourself, Chris, that a lot of you're like the founder of the business. Like you actually started the business, you know, the ins and outs of the business, and now you're franchising the business. And I think it's really beneficial as you're kind of talking about helping these new business owners get to, you know, 5 trucks, get to that level. And that's where I think about franchising. You can definitely be an entrepreneur in franchising as, you know, you get to that second, that third unit, like you're definitely an entrepreneur at that point. But one of the things that I know you had to do personally, Chris, is learn the business, you know, probably spend a couple of years cleaning and then cleaning windows and then moving more to the logistical aspect of things. And, you know, I know a lot of like business owners, like local community people, they start like a handyman business, they start like a heating, electric business, they get a truck, they grab a van, but it's an owner operator. And, you know, they maintain that throughout the next few decades. They never kind of get to that executive model where they're putting the management in place, focusing more on the high level marketing, sales of the business. How are you able to make that transition, and how can other people make that similar transition, Chris?
Yeah. So it's how I was able to do it was necessity. It just, the business was growing, quite rapidly, in the corporate location. When I finally made that transition to full time, we had like 9 trucks on the road. And then when I finally got fully, into the seat that I'm in today, or at least at the time before we were franchising, running the business, we just saw an exponential explosion of growth because I was able to focus on the things that actually mattered. So in our franchise system specifically, I can only speak for us. We don't want the owners to get in the trucks ever. We want you to start in biz dev, in leadership, build a great team, lead them to success, grow your business. This is not, Sparkle Squad and Elite are not a franchise where you would be on the tools for a couple years to get, the business cash flowing. It is, you work on the business to get the business cash flowing and really, really put your energy there. It's probably the biggest trap in home services is getting comfortable on the tools, because it becomes a little bit of a pacifier. You can put energy towards something because home services are, calorie based. You actually have to put physical energy into something that stimulates our amygdala reward pathways as I am growing my business, I'm working on my business. When you're not, you're washing windows, or you're doing something that doesn't have any sense of disproportionate return to your effort. So the big thing when owners get stuck in that, just speaking to general entrepreneurs, especially in home services, is you got to rip the Band-Aid clean off in one shot. Like that is literally the only way I've seen people be successful in the transition is I will not. And for me, how it is going to, I've never said this publicly either, how I was able to do it successfully, is I wore for a year, I wore really nice clothes to work. I wore clothes that I didn't want to get dirty. And that was like, I couldn't go out in the field if I had a collared shirt on. And so like like I said, this is the clay. We're the entrepreneurs. Like, set up systems inside your businesses that stop you from doing the things that you don't want to see yourself doing. For me, it was wearing a shirt and tie for a while.
Oh my God, that's awesome, Chris. That's like you've really like made yourself do it. That's really interesting. I like that. And I think the viewers will get a lot. Like, I feel like the most successful people, like, they just do like these little things that like no one would have ever thought of, but it really shows like the mindset, the determination, like consistency to do that for a full year. Most people would not do anything for a full year.
Yeah. And it worked, right? I mean, it's changing your own mindset, and it's hard to do, and it is possible.
Yeah. No, that's powerful, Chris. And I know the hour is very quickly winding up. I do have, I think, 2 more questions to kind of wrap down the episode. So one of the things when we think of like windows, you're not thinking like a sexy business. A lot of people come in thinking, food, fitness, like all these kind of like things that are usually changing pretty often. What do you tell someone that, I talked to a candidate, I'm presenting, a window cleaning business, and they're like, well, that's not something I'm passionate about. Where do you think the actual passion comes from as being a business owner? Does it need to be like you're passionate about cleaning windows, or where does the real passion come from?
Geez, that's a good one. So I would say we've been the ugly duckling since day one. I'm completely fine with it. Every one of our owners said, when they started looking at franchising, window cleaning was absolutely not even on the radar. It wasn't on the list. Yet here they are, which kind of shows to me that it's like, you don't need to find passion in the industry until it presents itself. You should feel passionate about the opportunity. You should, as you're looking at businesses, especially as you're evaluating franchises, agnostic of service line, which a lot of people do. They come in and they look at franchising and they go, I don't care if it's a QSR, a home service, or whatever. I just want something that has great systems that I can build upon. I think that's where we win the hearts and minds, is the development of these systems over such a long period of time, and kind of the proof in the pudding, and then the size of the addressable market. Most people don't acknowledge that we spend most of our days gazing through windows, and that industry just hasn't caught up with the time. A really good example of this is, 20 years ago, everybody kind of had a ladder in their garage. It was just you think back to your parents' house, there's like a ladder hanging in the garage and it just was there. Today, that's not the case. Most people don't have a ladder in their garage. Therefore, when they need they need to get their windows cleaned, like, maybe the husband or wife is like, we got to get this job done. It is actually more friction today to go to Home Depot, to buy the ladder, to buy the supplies, to do that, than to come home and wash your own windows, than it is to pick up the phone and call Sparkle Squad or an Elite and get it done. So the addressable market's actually growing, which is really interesting. Yeah, there you go.
That's called opportunity, everyone, right there. Unlimited opportunity.
Yeah.
There's endless glass.
There's endless glass. And it's just, I think that's one of the things that wins people over. But like, don't seek for passion in the industry if you don't have it out of the box. Seek for opportunity and be passionate about building something, and then everything else kind of falls into place, in my experience.
I agree. I think that's really powerful. And one final question, Chris, that I think is really helpful as we're kind of wrapping up the podcast. I know you have some interesting policies, and we talked about earlier, like when you're in a franchise, you're really part of a system. And I think sometimes people look at franchising as kind of like a dictatorship. Like you have to follow like the leader's rules. It's not your business, but really could not be further from the truth. Like the franchisor like really can't make the franchisee like do a whole lot. Like it really is their business to run, but the franchisor is going to guide them to success. If, as you brought up the Sherpa example, like they've climbed Mount Everest before, they have the tools, the systems for you, but are you going to kind of follow that and start to create your own systems underneath that umbrella? So you really create like this whole like community of your franchise owners, which for some people can be dangerous, having everyone on the other side, if you will, like in this community, they could bad talk you, do whatever they want. Like it's really like an open line of communication. But what I understand, you have like a Slack channel for your franchise owners and this policy of like no jerks and the best idea wins policy, which I think is fascinating. Chris, could you dive into that for the viewers? And
yeah, for sure. I mean, like there are differences between, system, use the Sherpa model. I'm not going to let somebody climb Mount Everest in flip-flops as the Sherpa. I'm going to say no. So if there are certain boundaries where the brand has to step in and say no, but when it comes to franchise owners collectively thinking, it is so powerful. Like the Big Mac came from a franchise owner. The $5 footlong came from a franchise owner. All these things that like became ubiquitous in the world came from great entrepreneurial people in a franchise system thinking. So we do connect all the owners. We have a giant group, and what you see is people solving each other's problems through shared experience, and us all elevating based on the shared experience. Sure, I have 20 years in this industry, but in the next couple of years, the collective of my system will actually have more experience than I do in the industry at the front line. So it's like, how can they see, what opportunities did they see on a day-to-day basis that can elevate the whole system? It's one of the beauties of franchising. A good friend of mine, Travis Tinnings, always says, calls it a friend in every city. He's like, no matter where you go, you can, if you have a great culture in your franchise system, you can have a friend in every city and stop and grab a beer with, your Sparkle Squad person somewhere on your vacation as you're, driving across the country. So for us, it's a non-starter. The no jerks policy begins in development. It is like, I'm having too much fun working with amazing people to risk that. Like it is that we would never put somebody in the brand that didn't fit the culture or wasn't, a kind person with the right motivations. And then the best idea wins, I think, is just, that's a happiness philosophy as well, is like, we don't pretend to know everything. We just pretend to be extremely experienced. And when a good idea bubbles up, who knows where that could go? Maybe it could be the next $5 footlong. So yeah, it's really important that the culture of our franchise owners, and early on I said, there's no commonality. There is one single thread. Like when we hold these conferences, there is no age, gender, race, nothing matches, except for everyone gets along and everybody has this shared motivation. And it's when you find that single thread of motivation and kindness and growth orientation and vision, you put these people in a room together at the conference, and it's unbelievable. It's magical almost, because everyone's kind of cut from that same angle, doing the same thing, pushing towards. And like, if you hamstrung that as a franchisor, you'd be definitely doing yourself a disservice. So yeah, we focus heavily on building a culture inside the organization.
No, it's just so powerful. Like for people that have been to like a mastermind or something like that, like you're around like-minded people. It's like this very powerful, like full day event. But then afterwards, everyone kind of goes their separate ways afterwards. And franchising, it's like an ongoing mastermind community where everyone's like on the same path, the same journey together. Because as like a entrepreneur independently, like it's a very isolating journey, like by yourself. There's not a lot of people like at the end of the day you can kind of tell your story to and like relate to certain people. You know, a lot of people that aren't on the entrepreneur journey, it's hard to kind of share similar stories. So I think in franchising, it's really cool, especially if, you know, you are 40s, 50s, 60s in corporate America, to be an independent business owner. If you have children, you're probably sacrificing their childhood, raising them a lot. Like franchising, you have a lot of that flexibility because you have people that have done it before, and it's not as much a guessing game, investing, you know, all this money on marketing dollars with no idea, you know, am I going to get a customer in return? So I love all those points, Chris. I know it is 10:30. If you have a meeting right now, feel free to hop off. I like to do like a quick recap at the end.
Awesome. Yeah. I just want to say thanks. You know, I really did appreciate having me on, and I appreciate everything you're doing, Josh.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Chris. I appreciate you hopping on. I appreciate you. I think the viewers will learn a lot today. I'm excited to dive into the recap in a second.
Awesome. Thanks so much, dude.
All right, Chris. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. I don't know how.
All right, everyone. So that was an awesome episode with Chris Stonis, the CEO and founder of Elite Window and Sparkle Squad. Some of my major takeaways were, first off, just as an entrepreneur, not having that steady paycheck. You know, life is going to change financially, lifestyle, impact. Life changes when you make that investment into a franchise. And that's why I think Chris and I were talking about, you know, business ownership, entrepreneurship. It's not the path for everyone, but what I love so much about franchising is that you get to go through this really 1 month discovery process to get all the information that you're looking for, so that you can really piece together what your life could potentially look like if you were to make that investment. And then also, really on Chris's path, what he really did is he took all the different things that he liked to do, and then just more opportunity kept appearing. You know, 10, 20 years ago, I could not have told you I'd be a franchise consultant in this position, but I learned all these different skills from social media, marketing, lead generation. And then I figured out, you know, this is really how I can combine my previous skill set with something that I'm passionate about doing. So it's really tough to find something that you're passionate about doing. But I think if you keep developing skill sets and trying new things, eventually you will find kind of that passion project, if you will. And even, you know, like window cleaning, for example, I don't think the passion necessarily comes from the job that you're doing, but from the opportunity and the skill set and what comes from that opportunity. Like with window cleaning, as we showed, there's glass everywhere. It creates endless opportunity for you to manage a team of people doing the labor and allowing you to kind of live that life on your own terms. And really, I also like, as Chris, the CEO, the founder, if you are someone that wants to do things independently, you know, he traveled the world studying the industry, learning from all these different business owners to ultimately figure out what he could do to make things a little bit differently, not just replicating the same model. And then also just being very clear on your goals, whether it's weekly goals, 90-day goals, 10-year goals, 3-year goals. Just have an idea of what you're looking for. And Chris did a really good job of having that utopia in his head and picturing what you want your life to look like. Because I'm really big idea of the master visualization. And the more you really visualize different things in your head, I think the more likely that stuff is to become a reality. And it's not necessarily about the dates of these goals that you set, but just the mission and you working towards these goals. You know, the goal, the date of the goal may change, but if that happens, just look in the mirror. What do you need to do differently to make that goal happen? So it's all about, having that utopia. What do you want your life to look like? As I started the podcast, life is very short. We all just have this one opportunity at this game called life. So make the most of it. Everyone, if you're listening, if you made it to the end, you're made for greatness. I guarantee you are made for greatness, especially if you made it to the end of the podcast. You listened to me speak for the full hour. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, share, comment, subscribe, help out the algorithm. Let's have a fantastic rest of your day, everyone.